Switch to a different screen. Yeah. Ooh. There I am. All right. That's good. I think I have the technical difficulties worked out a little bit this time. We'll see. I'm still not quite sure how I'm going to show you the inside of a 5-gallon bucket, but we'll figure that out as well. So, anyway, thanks for hanging out, everybody. We're just going to give it a few minutes for everyone to get their busy, crazy, organized Mondays together and get online. I've already started celebrating online. Today's drink of choice, Ash and Elm Cider. Somebody online knows what exact cider I'm drinking, but I couldn't tell you. It's delicious, though. Semi-sweet, semi-dry. Yeah. It's a semi-sweet. And it's delicious. So, my unfortunate setup right now is I can't quite see how many people are online right now or anything like that. So, I'm just going to guess a little bit right now. Is there 10? Is there 5? All right, so there's just a few of you right now. Okay? Oh, awesome. Yep. So, we're working today, for sure. Doing another edition of the digital classes. The efforts that hopefully you can learn something. And they offer a little bit of information and maybe a little entertainment. And all in hopes that you can give me a nice fat tip at the end of it. All those tips go to supporting the staff, who I had to lay off the entire team, I guess a week ago today. And so this is just my efforts to support the team. While they are in this unfortunate situation through no fault of their own. So there's a Venmo link in the comments. Go to that Venmo link. The name's Chef JJ's. And if you get any value out of this at all, I'd love your tip. So we're a couple minutes in. We'll just wait a couple more minutes. How many are on now? You'll need to just... How much longer do you want me to wait? Another minute or so? Okay. Another minute or so. With a few different tools. A few different tools that we're going to use today when it comes to preparing some meat. A few different knives, that is. Just a smaller chef's knives. I like playing with this one. It's a little 8.5 incher. Larger 10-inch. Nicer if you start working with some larger pieces of meat. And then boning knife, paring knife. Something with some flexibility for either carving around bone or working off silver skin. Something of that nature. So those are a few good tools for this. 5-gallon bucket. If we're going to be dealing with a larger cut of meat, you can actually fit a couple of briskets in one of this if you're going to make a lot of corned beef. But if you don't have a 5-gallon bucket, a cooler would work as well. And then some other smaller containers, whether they're going to be disposable aluminum pans or just simple Ziploc bags. So kind of your simple stuff. Again, a lot of these recipes are all going to be gauged towards stuff that you might have a little bit more time to do. And today specifically talking about curing meats. And this is something a lot of people maybe think they want to do or maybe thought about, but it's just too busy. And, well, maybe now you have a little bit of time to do it. The ingredients are simple. They're easy to come by. And they actually apply to a lot of different proteins. Corned beef is going to be kind of the main thing we're talking about today, but sneak peek of our Mondays is usually our Mondays are our either prepping days, staging days, things of that nature. So along with talking about corned beef, we are going to give you a little insight to the smoking class that we're going to do live on Wednesday. So in order to have good smoked meat, you have to spend a little bit of time preparing that. You don't want to wake up Saturday morning, grab something out of the freezer, thaw it out, throw some rub on it, and then smoke it, because that isn't going to taste very good. So a little bit of time, a little bit of planning, and it all works well. The only special ingredient that you probably don't have, or you may not have, is the pink salt. So this is a curing salt. This is called Prague powder. But you could Google curing salt, pink salt, Prague powder, and order this online. It's not expensive, and this is the magic ingredient when it comes to either preserving meats, curing meats, and also gives it that distinct color in this corned beef recipe and when you're doing these wet brines. So talk about corned beef first. We have a few different proteins here, but we've got some duck breast, got a whole brisket, and then we have some beef short ribs. And we're going to treat them all a little bit differently. Basically, all in the whole point is that we want to be able to cook this meat, preserve it, have it last a long time after we cook it, or spend a long time preserving it and then be able to cook it and enjoy it. And when I say a long time here, we're not going into charcuteries, hams. We're not going into super long cures. The longest thing we're going to do is the corned beef, which is 7 days. So whole brisket, you're going to want to keep in that brine about 7 days. If you're doing a smaller piece, maybe you're only doing like a 4-pound piece of meat or a 6-pound piece of meat, you can get away with doing this in 4 days. So keep that in mind. 4 to 7 days is the time you're going to need. All right. So let's talk about corned beef. So you can buy corned beef, which is brisket that's already been corned, which is a specific preservation method that we're going to talk about right now. So corned beef is really simple as far as the ingredients. Like I said, it starts off with water, and then I'm going to show you a bowl of really fancy ingredients. Salt, brown sugar, a little bit of cinnamon stick. And then you have a little bit of ground ginger in there. All these recipes are on our website, or they're already in the comments. But this specific recipe is the corned beef recipe. Then you have a little bit of pickling spice. So this is sometimes called a couple different things. Sometimes we just call it pickling spice. You can actually just buy pickling spice in your spices section at your grocery store. Or if you had all of the separate aromatic components, which is peppercorn and clove and juniper berry and star anise and bay leaf, you can combine all those and that's your pickling spice. And then we also have whole peppercorn and mustard seed. So we're going to take all of those dried ingredients along with the Prague powder, the pink salt, and we're going to mix it with water, warm water to dissolve all of that. And the reason why we want the warm water is we want it all to dissolve, the solids, the sugar, the salt, but we also want the aromatics to kind of activate. So a slow simmer, quick boil, we just want to get it all hot, get it all dissolved. And then next important step is you want it to cool. You don't want to put any sort of raw meat in warm liquid or even room temperature liquid, so you want it nice and cold. So really quickly, kind of what it all looks like together. I'm going to leave these out right here, actually. So this is just this is going to be impossible to show you, I'm sure, but it's just a liquid of the salt and sugar, and then it has the aromatics that have been floating on top. Now, like I said before, the super secret component to that, the curing thing, is the pink salt. And this is specifically for curing meats. So it's not for seasoning your food. You would not want to consume this raw. I mean, it's sodium nitrate, and it's toxic. So on the container, it actually says 1 ounce per 25 pounds of meat. So you're going to be using very, very little when compared to the overall total. We're talking about half teaspoons worth for whole briskets, or maybe a teaspoon worth for a whole brisket. So it doesn't take a lot. It goes a long way. But what you get is a really beautiful product. So that's the mixture. It's simple. It's easy to make. Technically, if you wanted to make a batch of this mixture and just keep it in your refrigerator in your garage and use some of it as you wanted, you could. There's nothing that's going to go bad in that mixture. You just don't want to reuse the mixture. So when we're done, putting the corned beef or putting the brisket in there, when we're done using that, pulling it out, we're going to dispose of that mixture. So super easy. There's nothing expensive about it, and it's a fantastic tool when it comes to curing meat. So beef is the most common for corned beef, but you could technically throw duck in there, or you could throw beef ribs. You could really throw chuck roast, anything with a good amount of fat on it would corn, and it would get that pink color, and it would tenderize, and then you could cook it up in a couple of different ways. So specific to the brisket, I do want to just trim up a little bit, but I don't want to over trim this brisket. So just any sort of flaps of fat or chunks of fat, we would trim off. But we're not going to spend a whole bunch of time trimming this all up, because if you do that, you lose a little bit of flexibility on what you can do with this brisket. So meaning, if I was to fully trim this, because I know I want to make corned beef and cabbage, I would fully trim this and cure it, because I know I'm going to end up just kind of chopping this up and then putting it in a vat of water and beer and simmering it. And I don't want a bunch of extra fat in there simmering in that liquid. It's just kind of a foamy mess. But that's not a decision I need to make right now. And I actually want to show you guys pastrami, which is cured, or it's the corned beef when it's come out of the bucket after 7 days, and then we give it a specific rub and get it ready for smoking. So we're going to leave this pretty much alone, and we're going to put it in this vat of solution. Now, it doesn't necessarily look like enough liquid, but it is. So we just put that in the bucket, pour the cooled solution over the top, and then you just want to make sure that the liquid is submerged. So if I need to press it down a little bit, or I need to put a plate or something to hold it under the liquid, I'll do that. And that's actually perfect. So just a plate there will make that work. So be sure, if you guys have any questions, get on the live chat, ask any questions you might have. Let us know you're there. Be sure and subscribe. Let your friends know about the channel and share it with them, so we can get a bunch of people on here supporting our team. So put that in a bucket, keep it submerged, and put it in your refrigerator in your garage for 7 days. 4 to 7 days, depending on the size of the meat. Smaller cuts, 4 days. Full brisket, 7 days. And leave it alone. And now you've started the journey of corned beef. After 7 days, get this plate off. You're going to have a little different product. Oh yeah. So the immediate thing that you're going to notice is the texture. It's going to be a much softer piece of meat. It's going to be much more flimsy than the brisket was immediately. Before you treated it at all. You'll actually feel it stretch a little bit, and it'll have this really cool kind of pink color that starts to happen, and that's from the reaction with the salt, the pink salt, the curing salt. So we're going to take that out of the liquid. I'm going to get rid of that. And now we're going to make some pastrami. So pastrami is just smoked corned beef. So when you have corned beef, you have this product right here that's fully broken down. It's been cured with the curing salt. Now there's a couple different ways that people cook it. Most commonly is that they boil it, or they put it into a slow cooker or Instapot or something like that, and you get corned beef and cabbage, and that is corned beef. What we do mostly, because we're eggheads and we like cooking on grills and we like the flavor of smoke, is that we'll smoke this brisket. Now, a piece of brisket that's been corned and smoked is pastrami. That is pastrami. The other thing that makes pastrami is the actual flavor profile of what goes on the brisket before smoking. And then, of course, it needs to be smoked with oak. Otherwise, it's not really pastrami. It's just a variation on it. So we always do our own variations, but that's kind of the rules when it comes to pastrami. Oak hickory, okay, get some people arguing there. Oak and hickory. So first thing I want to do is I want to prep this brisket for our smoking class on Wednesday. A little bit of prep ahead of time always gives us a good, great finished product. You can't really fake science, and you can't really speed it up. So we always want to take good care of the meat as far as curing it or breaking it down in some fashion so that when we do introduce that protein to smoke, it breaks down properly. So first thing I'm going to do is just trim off a little bit of this extra fat. Now that I know I'm going to make, look at that. Oh, it's so pink. Some pastrami. I'll just kind of trim off this fat cap a little bit. And the extra that's hanging off here. It's just not necessary. Brisket's always one of the most difficult pieces of meat to cook because it's really two totally different muscles that cook at different rates. So you have this thinner part here, which is your flat, and it's one muscle, and then you have your thicker part here, which is actually two muscles on top of each other, and that's right here. You can see this big ridge of fat right there. That's what separates your flat from your point, which is this bigger, thicker piece right here. The benefit of corning your beef, though, is that it breaks everything down. So when we do cook this, the whole thing tends to stay a lot more moist and a lot more tender versus kind of just your traditional brisket. So this is why this is kind of one of my favorite ways of doing brisket, because brisket's kind of a pain to cook. You don't always get the same result twice, and you could do the exact same thing because the cuts of meat are so inconsistent. And this is just the full max what you could do. So, a little mixing bowl. I'm going to mix your traditional pastrami spices, which is cracked black pepper, coriander, mustard, and paprika. Ooh. And this is a specific recipe that we'll share actually on our smoking class. Garlic powder, onion powder, and some brown sugar. All right, so I'll mix these together, and that'll become the rub for this brisket. And now, this is what I would consider ideal timing. We are taking care of the protein. We're rubbing this piece of meat a full 24 to 48 hours in advance of cooking it. Now, I use specific term 24 hours because I used to say do it a day ahead of time, but then people would make the mistake of getting home from work on a Friday night at 7 o'clock and rubbing the brisket and then waking up at 6 in the morning Saturday morning and putting the brisket on. And that's not a day ahead of time. That's like 11 hours. So the rub needs to be applied to the meat a full 24 hours in advance. So yeah, that's a good question. So We have a question. They're asking about yield on product. And the question is, if you have a 10-pound piece of meat, how much will it yield? I can't specifically answer that because every whole muscle, whether it's a brisket, a chuck roast, a strip loin, ribeye, beef tenderloin, those are all whole muscles that have different losses when you trim them up. So a beef brisket has a ton of fat. You're going to have about a 40 to 50% loss on beef brisket if you are somebody who does not like the fat. Some people love the fat on the brisket, and then now you only have about a 30-35% loss. Some people don't like the fat at all on brisket, and that's where you get a lot of over trimming. So you could have quite a bit of loss on brisket. Beef ribs, you're going to have about a 40% loss. Whole muscle steaks, so your New York strip loin, your ribeye, you're going to have about a 25% loss. So when you're looking at those whole muscle meats in the store, you're finding them, they're going to be much cheaper per pound, and even with adding another 20 or 30% to that price, it's still cheaper than the pre-cut stuff. So anytime you can deal with whole muscle, I would recommend it. And at this point, lots of people, I don't know if you're finding it at your grocery stores or if that's the only thing left. I know some commercial places are even opening up to the public as far as offering their products. So whole muscle meats are probably going to be the protein du jour for the near future. So the more curing and preserving we can do, the better, I think. So I've liberally rubbed this whole brisket. So now it's been cured for 7 days, and it's been given a rub. And what that rub is going to do is it's going to enhance, it's going to work its way into the meat and the fat, and when we introduce it to smoke, all those flavors are going to come together, and we should have some really awesome pastrami. Now, I'm going to do a live shoot tomorrow. I'm not sure what time. I'll figure that out. But I'm going to do a live shoot tomorrow. It's only going to last about 15-20 minutes. I'm going to show you exactly how we fire up our grill and set it up with smoke. And I'm going to throw this bad boy on and let it slow smoke overnight until the next live shoot, basically. So it'll go 15, 16 hours. So probably tomorrow, early afternoon sometime, I will throw this on the grill and show you guys exactly how we do it. And let that one go overnight. So that's corned beef / pastrami. The next thing we're going to talk about are these beef ribs, because beef ribs are delicious, but if they're not prepared right, they can be a little too fatty and not super enjoyable. So I always talk when we're talking about ribs, the silver skin, peeling off the silver skin off the back. Beef ribs particularly, their silver skin is more of a white fat that doesn't really peel off, so just give it a bunch of scoring. There's nothing on the back of this that you're going to want when you're done cooking anyway, but do make sure you score the meat quite a bit, because we want anything we're putting on there, any rubs, spices, any smoke we're introducing, we want it to be able to penetrate through the bottom as well, so we'll give it some good scoring there. And then I'm actually going to prepare these beef ribs a couple different ways for you guys. We shared a ham rib recipe, which is kind of in the same spirit of cured meat curing. The original recipe applies to pork ribs, and it uses a recipe that you would often use when you're curing a ham. So the ham is the butt of the pig. Raw hams are not, most people when they think of ham, they already see the ham in the grocery store. It's already been smoked. It's already been sliced a lot of times, and then oftentimes they're heating it back up with a glaze or something of that nature. There are places that offer raw, uncured hams, which is, basically just the back sirloin of a pig. But the recipe to make ham or to cure ham, same kind of idea of making ham is the same idea of corning beef. You're using a combination of salt and sugar, aromatics, and of course the curing salt, the pink curing salt. So our ham rib recipe is something that's very similar. We use a combination of sugar in the raw and brown sugar. So that's going to be our sweet part. And then, of course, equal parts salt. And then the aromatics we use for these are just a little bit of clove and a little bit of bay leaf. So not all the crazy aromatics that are going into pastrami. And then, excuse me 1 second, we'll grab this liquid. Perfect. And then the curing method is much quicker. You just need to put the ribs in the wet mixture 24 hours. So we're going to take one of these beef ribs and we're going to put them in that same kind of wet mixture that we did for the corned beef. We're going to put them in that mixture. We'll pull them out tomorrow and then we'll do a slow cook on them as well. And we'll get a really cool flavor out of that. I'm actually going to throw both of these in my white bucket. So those are going to go in that same liquid mixture, and I'll show you guys that tomorrow. Move this guy out of the way. And then I'm going to show you some duck breasts. Again, duck breasts, the reason why I'm showing you duck breasts, I'm seeing them, so I think people might be a little afraid or not sure. Or they might have an experience like, oh, duck is really gamey and I don't enjoy it. And at the end of the day, the duck you're getting from your local grocers, the local people who are raising it, that's just not how it tastes, especially if you treat it right. If you're getting it from your buddy who just went hunting, maybe you're going to come across some of that more gamier stuff. So either way, this recipe is going to apply to both that kind of wild game and if you're finding more stuff in the grocery store. So we're going to separate the duck skin from the duck breast, maybe. Oh yeah, there we go. Usually you can just slide your thumbs under it and peel it back, and then it just peels right off after you slice it a couple times. So I'm going to pull this skin off so that I show you a couple different things. So what we have here now is a boneless, skinless duck breast, and then the skin. And we're actually going to cure this duck. So another preservation method. So we can do a dry rub actually I want to take this guy. Yeah. We can do a dry rub. We play with these guys a lot. Dizzy Dust. Dizzy Pig out of Manassas, Virginia. Good people. So this is a combination of salt and sugar and spices. And that's really the important thing when it comes to doing any sort of cure or anything. You're looking for salt and sugar, and then you're looking for some sort of spices, some sort of flavor. So a little bit of dry rub, and then we're just going to coat this. And the important reason why we're doing this today is, again, we want this dry rub to have time to have an effect on that meat and on that fat. And so when we introduce it to smoke, it actually breaks down properly. Oftentimes when people are smoking either pork shoulder or larger cuts of meat, they get what's called the stall, which is they're cooking and it reaches a certain temperature and then just kind of stays at that temperature for a long time. And that's usually because the meat has not been properly cured. So dry rub method. We're going to let that sit we're actually going to let this one sit for a couple days. So I won't smoke this until Wednesday. And then the one that's in the corning solution, we'll pull out tomorrow and put it on the grill with the pastrami. Right. and now our cured duck. So you can do it one of two ways. You can separate the fat, the breast fat, from the breast meat, or you can leave it on. We want to use that skin for something else. So we're going to cure that skin, but we're going to separate it now versus later just because it's a little bit easier to do. Right. So then it just peels back. Doesn't take a lot of slicing. Once you get it peeled back, you can just run the knife along the edge. All right. So we've got our breast and our fat. So the cure on this is really, really simple. It's sugar and salt. So the salt is going to draw out the moisture, and then the sugar is going to preserve the meat. And then you need some sort of flavor, and you can do flavor lots of different ways. You could throw in fresh herbs, you could throw in aromatics, or you could throw in like a already made seasoning. So this already has some spices in it and already tastes like something. So I'll mix that together. And then we're actually going to encase using, here we go, plastic container. We're actually going to encase, I'm going to take some of this mixture and I'm going to put it in the bottom. And then we're going to heavily coat the skin. I want to make sure it's nice and flat. It's not laying on each other. I'm going to put that on the bottom. And then I'm going to take the same thing with the breast meat. Now don't worry, eventually all of this will get washed off. But we're really trying to create a cast almost, so that no air is getting to this meat. It's completely encased in the sugar and the salt and the spices. And then it will draw out the moisture under refrigeration. Into this cast. So we pour that on top, and then that just kind of encases it all. Pack it all down. And then we're going to let that sit in there for a couple of days. And that'll actually cure that duck breast. Make it very, very easy to cook, very easy to smoke, or do whatever else we want. But once we've cured it, it's drawn a lot of that extra moisture out. It's made it a somewhat shelf stable. Once we smoke it, it'll actually be shelf stable. And then it just gives you a lot more life from it. So we'll put that into a container. And then we are almost set. So we're going to do a little comparison here. I'm going to take some of the same spices and I'm just going to season up the remaining duck breast. So I'll fully season them just like we did the beef ribs. I'll let them sit a couple days and then we'll smoke them along with the preserved duck breasts so I can show you guys a side-by-side difference. So it's too small. You get the right size bowl for this. Rub. Just growing this rub a little bit. So if you have just not quite enough rub, like, oh man, I really love this rub, there's just not quite enough left for what I want to do, just add a little bit of salt and sugar, and then add that rub to it. And just grow it a little bit. It's really the base of most pre-done seasonings anyway. All right. And then we'll leave the fat on these, and then we will liberally season the duck breasts. And then we want to make sure and wrap these as well. So we'll wrap them with plastic as well. All right. So that was a little bit of insight into go. I went ahead and put you on speakerphone, Erica. Sorry. But that was a little bit of insight into kind of a prep day for us, or a staging day if you're going to do cured meats, or you're going to get meat ready for smoking. A couple days ahead of time is always going to treat you really well. Whether it's going to be a dry rub, whether you're going to put it into a brining solution or a corning solution, or whether you're going to actually pack it into a salt cure. Those are just a few of the different ways that you can introduce salt and sugar to your protein to help preserve it once you have a thawed piece of meat, and also to set it up for success so that when you do introduce it to smoke, it cooks properly, which is at a nice steady. So if you're graphing that temperature chart, it's a nice steady incline. And that's what we'll do. I've got an online thing I can share. We'll put the link in so you can actually watch the pastrami cook overnight. You can actually follow the temperature and see how it cooks and how the grill responds, and get to watch that live. So if anybody has any questions at all, feel free and jump in the chat room or ask. Like I said before, you guys, for those of you who didn't see at the beginning, we're offering these digital classes as a way to offer, maybe some information, maybe a little bit of entertainment, help you guys learn a bit about what to do with food. We've been, or as I've been doing this as a personal chef for about 15 years, a little over, I guess. Wow. And that's how the company started, was teaching people how to cook in their homes and how to use the stuff that was already in front of them. And then, of course, how to get the most out of it by whether it's cooking it in your oven, proper temperature time, or cooking it on your grill. But as that's grown and it became popular and the company grew, I needed a team. And for that company to take the next step, and what it's accomplished over the last 10 years could not have been accomplished without that team. And so that's why I'm here doing these classes, so that you guys can help me help them. So if any of this information helped at all, or was useful at all, of any value to you at all, please give me a tip. All those tips go straight to supporting the crew. They go straight to the team, so that I can keep them around, so that when we're ready to go ahead full steam, we're ready to go. So thank you guys very, very much for hanging out with me today. I will be checking back in tomorrow. Again, it'll be about 15-20 minutes about just exactly how we fire up that grill and we throw on some of these meats, and then you'll be able to track that. And then Wednesday we'll be talking more specifics about smoking. So I'll show you a couple different recipes, a couple more recipes, and we'll get more into smoking woods and a little bit of technique. And I'm sure we'll be talking a little bit about thermometers and time and different barbecue sauces and all sorts of geeking out stuff. So thank you all very much. I appreciate you, and have a great Monday, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Oh wait, I have to push it.